So welcome to our virtual session with the British Council and powered by the movement. The movement is a project which is very dear to me, which I created, that focuses on building, connecting and exploring the cultural, creative and sustainable values within Southern Africa. So with that being said, I really wanted to highlight the cultural sustainability as a key factor in creating a better tomorrow. So without further ado, I will hand over the mic or the virtual camera to Niamh, the Country Director, British Council for Mauritius, who will share a few words. Over to you, Niamh.
Thanks, Priya. Delighted to be here today, so thank you for inviting me. 2021, a strange year, I think, on many levels, but 2021 is a make or break year to confront the global climate emergency. That was a statement that was said recently by the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, and how true are those words. Action needs to be taken now to reduce climate change before it's too late. And as we all know, just until yesterday, over 10,251 kilometers away from Mauritius, certainly, in Glasgow, countries were debating and seeking solutions at COP26 before it is indeed too late. So if we remind ourselves, what were they hoping to achieve at COP26? Well, the event had 4 goals: to get countries to set higher targets for reducing emissions, to help countries to adapt to the changing climate, to raise funds. Of course, countries will need money to be able to achieve the goals 1 and 2. And the final goal was to work together. The climate emergency can only be solved if countries work together. Countries will need to agree how to do this and to take action quickly, as we know. To support COP26 ambitions, the British Council is working with partners worldwide to provide a platform for global climate cooperation, dialogue and action, sharing ideas, developing innovative climate solutions and taking positive action together. And all of us here today is just one example of this, being part of this amazing Tomorrow Together festival. Now that COP26 is finished, I'm delighted to be here today and to be part of this virtual session, to hear some reflections and highlights of COP26 and hear about what we can do here in Mauritius. What are some of the simple things we can all be doing to start practicing for a better tomorrow together? A huge thank you, of course, to Twig and Imiloa Collective for inviting me to be here today. I'm really looking forward to hearing from Mahendra, to hear your reflections on what was discussed over the last 2 weeks and what we can do together to confront this global climate emergency and create a better tomorrow together. So thank you very much again, and look forward to hearing. I'll pass over to Mahendra then.
Okay, thank you very much, Niamh. So I also am very thankful to Priya and to Twig for giving this opportunity. So I'll basically be talking from the point of view of being an ACU Commonwealth Futures research cohort. I've been part of the COP26 right at the start of this year, around March, where I was part of this cohort, and we've been working with many Commonwealth countries around the world, and we've been working as a whole group, but also in smaller groups, to be able to come up with research action plans for our individual countries. So I'll be talking a bit more on that. But also, actually, we are meant to be in Glasgow to be able to attend the COP26, but because of the pandemic, a decision was taken that we have been following that virtually. So my own background is in built environment. So my presentation will be mostly in the built environment, but I've been also, of course, working with other members of the Research to Action project, like I said, from the ACU climate research cohort. So I've been working with other members who have worked in various other fields, like the ocean, biodiversity. So I'll be able to also comment a bit on these areas. Okay. So it's the agenda for today. I've prepared it very briefly, like Niamh mentioned. It's really focused on what can we do practically and actually My focus for the action I proposed to Mauritius was indeed community action. As part of these workshops we have been following from the ACU, the focus was how do we engage with the community so that when we are designing solutions, we design solutions with the community so that we have a better chance of success. So that's going to be the focus. Actually, the very last bullet point, if I may, circular homes have been one of the ideas I proposed, and also I've been running workshops in Mauritius, so I'll be sharing a bit on that. And actually, it's something which I would want to carry forward, because I personally believe that circular homes, as I'm going to present it, in a very simple way, how communities can understand what is climate change and also understand how can they contribute to it. Yeah. So I'll be going very briefly on climate change, just what it is in very few words. Like we know, there's lots of theories on that, and it's quite long. If you really want to understand what is happening in terms of climate change and the impacts we're having, that's quite intensive, I would say. So I'm not going to go into that detail. A bit on the COP26 format, which is a bit different to what we have been seeing in previous COPs. So I'm just going to briefly cover that, and also some main messages from leaders, especially from our own Prime Minister, and also from, like Niamh mentioned, there was a very inspiring message from the UN Secretary, but also one from the Prime Minister of Barbados. So I'll be just broadcasting that, very short. I'm not going to show the whole, but it was really, that message was really well received around the world. It was shared across social media and YouTube. So it was really a reality check for countries like Mauritius, who are sort of on the receiving side of climate change, and people who are really living, if you want, the impacts of climate change, and in a way helplessly, what it represents for them. So I was just broadcasting that message, part of it, so that we can really know what are the issues and what are the apprehension of people who are facing climate change. Then, like I said, I'll be giving briefly my experience of an issue called World Futures Climate Research Cohort. And one of the projects which I worked on was a youth voice to COP26, quite broad project, I would say, for Mauritius, with an online survey for our youth, starting around August. And then based on that, we'll be running a few trainings and workshops. So I'll be talking on that, and I will try to conclude what is the way forward. So on the climate change, I would say we tend to see, if you look at the technicality of it, it tends to be quite complex, and the community or common people, we tend to think it's not for me, it's very difficult to understand, but it's not at all difficult to understand what is climate change and what actually is why it is causing. If you really refer back to our primary school and what we've learned, some of us, we have done environmental studies like EVS, now it is called SSE at primary school. If you look at the fundamentals of climate change, it's really learned at primary school. So very simple stuff like photosynthesis, you have water cycles, or air pollution, water pollution, and we can very easily understand why we're having climate change. It's not really something which is difficult to understand. And even in the workshops which I've been participating, if you explain to people why you're having climate change, they actually understand very well if we actually know how to simplify the message. So as I go along, I'll be taking some examples. And I would say when we run these workshops for the community, for people, for the general public, they are actually quite, I would say, it's quite revealing for them if you explain in very simple terms. So I'll be just taking this approach as we go along. And in a way, I would say all problems that we have due to climate change can be traced back to a forgotten or overlooked relationship with our ecosystem, with nature. If you look at any other problem related to climate change, and if you start to look at documentaries on climate change, you'll find there's a chain of events. It's all interrelated because we know our ecosystem, there are lots of dependencies. So if something doesn't work well, somewhere is going to impact something else. And it's really very complex in terms of this, if you want, impacts of climate change. If you start looking at documentaries, you will find even climate change is causing changes in animal species, how they are migrating around the world, and how they are lost in a way, because there used to be some migration pattern, and because of climate change, they are lost now in the ecosystem. So it's really heart-rending if you start looking at what it means for different species in our world, be it plant species or be it animal species. And indeed, if you look at the latest IPCC report, this is really unequivocal now, because if we go back, let's say 1 decade or 5 years back, we still have some uncertainty. Is it really human action has caused climate change, or is it something natural? Because we know from the changes in patterns of Earth's, the whole Earth's climate, it would change over time if you look at maybe 100,000, 200,000 years. Pattern, but now it's quite clear from reports from scientists, leading scientists around the world, it's very clear that human activity has caused climate change, and it also means that we can make changes for that if we change our lifestyle. I think it's quite logical if you take it from a very from a common sense, the way the industrial revolution has progressed and the way we have been developing and the way we have been clearing green spaces or the way we have been destroying biodiversity, I think it's quite common sense. But still, there were a group of researchers, if you want, a group of maybe people who had vested interest in economic developments, for example, people who will extract oil or people who would be supporting fossil fuels, for example, they would tend to resist these changes. So I would say maybe that's where it all came from, where people were questioning, no, this is normal, the patterns we're seeing in terms of carbon dioxide level or how the earth is warming up, they would tend to say, no, this is normal, but now it is scientifically proven, actually it's not normal. It is actually artificial, it is man-made. So I mentioned about very basic stuff we learn at primary school. So this is one example. We all learn about motorcycles at primary school. So this is one, actually one slide in one of the workshops we've been running on water, climate action for water, because we know water is a big issue, be it from a consequence of climate change, if you want, or directly related as an adaptation measure. So this will be very simple things, how the water cycle works, where we start with the sea getting evaporated and then being carried inland and then falling off as rainfall and then penetrating to the ground. So we know Mauritius depends a lot on having the underground boreholes being filled up properly so we get water. So, but this is a normal cycle which would have in an ideal case. Yeah, but when we start disturbing any of these patterns, be it in terms of construction, means preventing this water from percolating into the ground, or in terms of, for example, into the rivers that we have, if, for example, we don't deal properly with flooding, so we allow rainwater to carry chemicals or to carry topsoil into our rivers, so we have lots of issues. Yeah, so I think this is what I was trying to stress on. It's very easy to explain to the general public, to the common man, that if we have such impacts and if you're not properly managing certain, we are disturbing these natural cycles, then we would definitely have disruptions. Yeah, so this is just one example, but if you look at any other impacts of climate change, you can do a similar thing. Now, this one is, like I was saying, I really work in the field of built environment, and this is another effect of our own doing, if you want. So on the left there, you find this was how things were before, when things were very natural, and then when we start constructing, let's say, a building, or we start having hard surfaces like this, if you have tarmac or road, then we are disturbing this natural flow of water anyway. So we're going to have more and more of this surface flow, as you can find here in the arrow. So this is very logical, nothing difficult, but when in a workshop you talk about this to people, it's something which they don't actually thought about. It is very important. But now when they are aware, yes, when I'm constructing a house, actually my roof is starting to produce some more of this surface flow, which is not natural. And if I don't deal with that, what are the consequences? People become aware. And as I go along, I'm going to talk of very simple solutions we can take at our home level. This is what I refer to as a circular home. Now, a bit on the COP structure. So, like I mentioned, it's a bit well structured this time. They have really grouped it into themes, because if you look at climate change, like we said, there are many areas which are being affected currently and which are related to climate change, and various areas which you need to think about. So the very first day was the World Summit, Leaders Summit. This is where the world leaders intervene, and this is where we have the messages from the Queen, and we have the message from the UN Secretary, like we mentioned, and different leaders. So this is where, during that, on the very first day, our Prime Minister, so Honorable Pravin Kumar Jagannath, actually intervened. So I'm going to very briefly mention what are his vision in the subsequent slides and what it means for us. Yep. And in the subsequent days, on Wednesday, so we had Wednesday was for finance, which was very important. We have heard of the $100 billion fund that needs to be mobilized to be able to be distributed around the world for climate adaptation and mitigation. And we have heard that actually we are short around $20 billion short of that amount, and this fund would not be mobilized straight away. It's actually going to be in 2023 because of COVID impacts and so on. So still, if you look at how climate activists are responding to the COP26, they are saying, yes, it is always like this. We have lots of promises, but then no concrete decisions are taken at the COP itself. So there have been many, if you want, negative views on actually what have been the outcome of COP26. Yeah, I've been attending a few sessions. Actually, I participated in a panel session on Tuesday the 2nd of November, from the built environment side, where it was the key skills that we need for the construction industry to be transformed. Yeah, so this was a panel discussion that took place on the 2nd itself, so right at the start of COP26, and I had the opportunity to give my perspectives and also the work I've been doing in Mauritius. But very important outcome for that, they are creating something called climate initiative for the built environment. So in the UK and around the world, and they were actually the president of that climate initiative program from Pakistan. So they've described what is the vision. So basically it's about educating the architects and the engineers and all the stakeholders of the construction industry. How can we make people think differently, and how can we integrate in the building process of big commercial residential buildings? How can we start bringing about the change in mindset? So I'm not going to go in detail, but the current way we are constructing is wrong. And the current way is basically to do with a very logical thing. If you want to do a project well, we all know we need to work in teams. We need to be able to really brainstorm and come up with ideas right at the start, so that our solution is really well created. And one particular and one if you want, one important aspect of that is to design for the persons who will use the system. For example, if you're constructing a building, the owners or the occupants have to be integrated in the loop, but that's not happening now. Currently, the way we are constructing now is the architect will do the design, and then afterwards the engineer will just plug in and then design all the services there, the air conditioning, the plumbing, the lighting, and so on. It is all in a very siloed way, so it's not integrated, and that's the current culture, unfortunately, and it's around the whole world. It's a very difficult culture to change. This is one of the main, if you want, barrier to having properly designed buildings. And if you have building design that way, they would have a huge carbon impact. They would need lots of air conditioning, and they would need lots of lighting. They would not harness resources that is available. So it's not sustainable in a way. So this was one of the main takeaways. So how do we make this change? How do we ask, how do we get these stakeholders of the construction industry to actually start talking together on projects? So that was one of the main takeaways, and they're creating a program now so that our young architects, even the architects who have been in the industry for a long time, how do you make this change in mindset so that they actually integrate this new way of thinking in their work. So this was one of the important things. And at the level of Mauritius, since we'll be collaborating with this climate initiative, so I've been trying to contact people here like the Association of Architects and the Construction Industry Development Board and the ministry, so that we can bring them on board, so we can have this type of training on. And then we had sessions on finance and then energy. Also, all these sessions which you find there, the good thing is they are still available on the COP26 website. And if you click on, they will find their live session, but when you click, you can still look at the YouTube videos. So very rich discussions around there. And then week 2, so we had a break on the 7th, and then the week 2 included sessions on adaptation, loss and damage, and then gender, science, innovation, transport. And then again on the very penultimate day, it was cities, regions, and built environment. So I did attend this time. I did not participate as a panel member. So again, very nice discussion going on. If you look at all these, for each day there, you'll find around 10, maybe 10 discussions in parallel going on from different stakeholders, from different organizations, from different companies. So it was quite rich, and it's still there on the website. So anybody from any specific area, so it is still a resource you can have access to. Yeah, so like I mentioned, on the very first day, we had address. So I've just given some addresses there. And if you look at the addresses from these different people, you'll find actually it was, you will actually find most of these people actually agree. If you look at the Queen's address from Prince Charles or ex-President Barack Obama and so on, you'll find that everybody agrees. These world leaders agree that we need to take action. But actually, as an irony, there were some leaders not present. I'm not going to highlight it here. So there are still around the world people who are more inclined to economic development and not taking care of what is happening in terms of climate and impact. So it is still there. It's a very difficult situation to address. If you look at in terms of carbon emissions, I will come that a bit later, what it means for Mauritius. If you look at the carbon emissions that different countries have, it's actually ranked in different levels. We have the US and China. They are, if you want, the major emitters. So if we really want to mitigate climate change, these countries would have to come on board and start really having changes in the way the strategies for development. Else, we will still be actually having more emissions and worsening climate change. Now, there's one message which is from Niamh. So I don't know if you had a chance to look at that. So I want just to briefly play that. It's actually a very nice message for the context of Mauritius, but for any nation who are facing the effects of climate change. It was a very strong message. So I'll just play that briefly. I won't play the whole message, but just want to share that with you. And then you can see there what was actually the content for countries who are receiving.
Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the pandemic has taught us that national solutions to global problems do not work. We come to Glasgow with global ambition to save our people and to save our planet, but we now find three gaps. On mitigation, climate pledges or NDCs. Without more, we will leave the world on a pathway to 2.7 degrees, and with more, we are still likely to get to 2 degrees. These commitments made by some are based on technologies yet to be developed, and this is at best reckless and at worst dangerous. On finance, we are $20 billion short of the $100 billion, and this commitment, even then, might only be met in 2023. On adaptation, adaptation finance remains only at 25%, not the 50-50 split that was promised nor needed given the warming that is already taking place on this earth. Climate finance to frontline small island developing states declined by 25% in 2019. Failure to provide the critical finance and that of loss and damage is measured, my friends, in lives and livelihoods in our communities. This is immoral and it is unjust. If Glasgow is to deliver on the promises of Paris, it must close these three gaps. So I ask to you, what must we say to our people living on the front line in the Caribbean, in Africa, in Latin America, in the Pacific, when both ambition and regrettably some of the needed faces at Glasgow are not present? What excuse should we give for the failure? In the words of that Caribbean icon Eddie Grant, will they mourn us on the front line? When will we, as world leaders across the world, address the pressing issues that are truly causing our people angst and worry, whether it is climate or whether it is vaccines? Simply put, when will leaders lead? Our people are watching, and our people are taking note. And are we really going to leave Scotland without the resolve and the ambition that is sorely needed to save lives and to save our planet? How many more voices and how many more pictures of people must we see on these screens without being able to move? Or are we so blinded and hardened that we can no longer appreciate the cries of humanity? I have been saying to Barbadians for many years that many hands make light work. Today, we need the correct mix of voices, ambition, and action. Do some leaders in this world believe that they can survive and thrive on their own? Have they not learned from the pandemic? Can there be peace and prosperity if 1/3 of the world literally prospers and the other 2/3 of the world live under siege and face calamitous threats to our well-being? What the world needs now, my friends, is that which is within the ambit of less than 200 persons who are willing and prepared to lead. Leaders must not fail those who elect them to lead.
Okay, so I'll be stopping it here, but very interesting speech. I would invite you if you want to look at the whole message. So very, I would say, revealing lots of facts are given there and what we need to do and what are the impacts Barbados is facing. But I think similarly around the world there'll be many similarities between what she speaks. Yeah. So I'm shifting back to my slide now, and I think the general consensus, if you look at on the different speeches for the need to act now, with growing concern for lack of concrete action. So this is one, if you want, one complaint or one disagreement we have is we always have like targets given, and the targets are just very high level policies, but how actually to implement it is missing. So this is one thing which was meant to be addressed in COP26 is, yes, we are giving targets, but how concretely to achieve it and how concretely to bring it down to earth and to bring it to life, and how to concretely put it in the community. This is still unfortunately lacking. Yep. If you look at how the targets are given, there's lack of action plan. Yep. Now, for the main highlights for our Prime Minister from Mauritius, Honorable Pravin Jagannath. So these were the highlights of his speech. First was to reduce carbon emission by 40% by 2030. So again, that's people who have been following the COP and the Paris Agreement would see actually the government actually had promised to reduce emission by 30% by 2025. Actually, it increased by 30%. So we are already worse off now. So when we see reduce carbon emission by 40% by 2030, it's very important to know what is the baseline we're talking about. Is it the one in Paris Agreement, or is it the current levels? So we have to follow up. Like I was saying, we do have targets, but how to actually achieve it is very important. The next main theme was to achieve 60% clean energy by 2030. So this is quite achievable. From my own experience, from my own expertise, I would say if we push hard, we can even become 100% clean energy if we really put the policies right. Because Mauritius is quite a small country, and it should not be very difficult for us, especially we are in a region where we get lots of the sun, and solar photovoltaic is actually a very promising technology we can have. So if we have the proper policies and the proper financial incentives, we could actually become a standard or an example for a sustainable island. The next one was phasing out coal in electricity production by 2030. Actually, it was before what the Honorable Prime Minister said was before 2030. So maybe the plan is even by 2025. So depending on how things progress, because we know currently most our electricity is produced from coal, which is a major source of carbon emissions. Next one was promoting circular economy by reducing waste to landfill by 70% by 2030. So this is a very interesting, if you want, proposition, because we know currently in Mauritius, we do have the majority of our waste actually is going into landfills. And for a country like Mauritius, where our natural resources are very scarce, we are not making good use of that. So maybe in the future, we'll see more and more of projects based on circular economy. I've been myself involved in lots of campaigns for circular economy workshops, exhibitions. So I think this is a very nice move. Next one is encouraging use of electric vehicles. So that's a good move, but in itself, it has to be, of course, backed by renewable energy. If you have electric vehicles, but they are powered by electricity produced from coal, then you're not moving anywhere. Yeah. The sixth one is smart agriculture and island-wide tree planting programs. So I'll be talking a bit on biophilic design, and I think that should be one of the main themes around the world for us to deal with climate change. Like I said earlier, we are okay. So like I said at the start, one reason why we're having this issue with climate change is because we have forgotten or we are overlooking our relationship with the ecosystem or our environment. So if you want to start redressing the situation, I think the major focus should be on greening areas or rediscovering or if you want, rehabilitating the biodiversity you're losing. If you just look at statistics, Mauritius has only 2% of biodiversity left in terms of green areas based on where we were, if you want, at the very start of our civilization. So we've lost over 90% of biodiversity, and I'll be talking briefly on that. So I think biophilic design means nature-based solutions should be our focus as we go along. This was the main focus from our Prime Minister. Now, I mentioned about my involvement in the ECU Commonwealth research to action project. So I'm just briefly talking about my actually involvement in Mauritius. One of the main activities I've proposed and developed with GCITRP was a Youth Voice to COP26 forum. And out of this first activity was a survey, was to gather the feedback from the youth. So I'll be briefly just giving you the main findings of the survey to know what the youth think about and where they think are the issues and what are the concrete consequences they have lived in the community. So it was structured in 6 thematic areas, yeah, which are generally the agreed thematic areas for climate adaptation and mitigation. So very quickly, so we had 180 participants, and the first question was, do they belong to any NGO? So we found actually over 50% do not currently belong to any NGO or any group. So this would be nice to stop group them so they can do more concerted action. The next one is, how long have you been involved? So a majority are not yet engaged. Yep, or some of them just recently, whereas we have a major share of them which were actually involved quite far back. So how far are you aware of climate change? Now this one's a bit biased. I did think about this afterwards in the research to action group, because the tendency would have been that people who are aware of climate change would actually respond to this survey. That's the reality. So people who are not really into climate change or understand its impacts may have avoided actually participating. So we do see from the participants, most of them are quite aware. Like I said, this is not really the true picture of awareness in our youth. So how far do you think climate change is impacting livelihoods? So we've seen that from IPCC reports. So people do attach lots of the impacts in livelihoods now to climate change, which is good because they are now aware if something is happening in the community, this is something to do with climate change. How far do you think climate change can be tackled by changing human activities? So most of them believe, yes, if we change our lifestyle, we can do things. So again, that's positive. It means if government in the future comes forward with changes in policies and asks the community to adapt to the changes, they would be favorable to these changes. Now, this is where things become a bit more now uncertain. When you talk of climate targets and you talk of agreements on climate change, like the NDC, the Nationally Determined Contributions, or the IPCC report, you find that this the level of awareness is not great. So people have answered here mostly 3, and we know from surveys when someone put 3, it means they don't really know. Yeah, so this is something we need to work on. And this is again following what I just said. If you start talking about specific documents like the government website, talking climate change, or the NDCs, or the IPCC report, then most of the participants start saying yes, they don't know, or they're not aware of the documents, or just they didn't answer it. Then we started asking them about areas which they think are important across the community. So we found, if you look at the distribution there, we do have issues with flash floods in Mauritius. So most of them have seen that and actually are aware of the consequence of climate change. Extreme temperatures, another one we need to look at, because we know our summers are becoming warmer and people are using more aircons, which is sort of sticking us, if you want, in a vicious cycle where we use more aircons and we create more climate change. So this was very interesting for us to know what are the issues that the youth would be living in their communities. And then we asked them the question, where and in what areas would they want to have training? So in green building infrastructure, so this was the an area we have done the training. I'm going to talk about that very quickly. We had one today on sustainability for businesses with UN Compact, and it was Lux participated, Business Mauritius. So it was a very nice workshop today, earlier this morning. So we had the opportunity to actually have quite a range of workshops and training based on the feedback from the participants. So some of the trainings I can show you there. So there was one from water adaptation and mitigation measures by Bino Badundi and Dashim Zerouyao, so the experts in water solutions. There was one I've run myself, it's a physical workshop. So it's based on the circular home concept. I'll be discussing a bit more in detail as we go along. This was what we had today, sustainability for businesses. So really very insightful how businesses, especially from Business Mauritius, so what are they creating for, because this Mauritius represents the whole range of small and medium enterprises in Mauritius. So what sort of frameworks they're putting in place for businesses to green the operations, if you want. And then we had interventions from Salima, from UN Compact, also from Christian, from Rogers, and Evita from Lux. So all of them are really very much involved in circular economy and sustainable development. So it was a very nice workshop. So I put this diagram there because I really like this diagram. It's from Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Circular Economy Framework. I think these are the 3 main pillars. If you start looking at them closely, we can actually address many, or if not all, of the climate issues we have, especially the regenerate national systems, which I would stress a bit more as we go along. Now, one project, like I said, I focused a lot on was circular homes. Especially, I was looking for an idea which actually aligns with my own interest in the built environment, but also in a way which we can engage the community. Yep. So this is the reason I kept thinking about this, and I thought, how can we go into the community, raise awareness, and make people actually buy in and actually start taking measures. Yeah. So the circular home is based on 3 main nexuses. So I put the materials, energy, and water. We do have other, if you want, dimensions, aspects we need to take care of. But I think we need to start slowly, and then when people are on board, then we can integrate other dimensions. And I've said in terms of systems, the infrastructure part, but the more important part, the people part of it. So I think if we start creating that awareness and people buying in, everyone has an emotional bond to their home. So if we can show to these people what they can do concretely at their home and make the home become the backbone of community action, community climate action, I'm sure this is going to be amplified, not just at home level, but at neighborhood, national level. Because imagine if all our inhabitants start becoming aware of sustainable and circular action, I'm sure they will transmit that in their offices, they will transmit that in every sector, and they will sort of become sustainability champions. So this is really a project I have at heart, and I intend to push that forward. So very briefly, what is it about, the circular home? I'm not going to go in detail here, just to show you how did I go about in the workshop. So it was really to encourage the participants to do a small plan, something like this of a home, very simple, not architectural, and then starting to ask them where the sun rises, where it sets, where you have windows in your house, and then from the simple passive design measures, methods which exist, which I've sort of made in a very non-technical way, they can start actually predicting themselves which areas are actually going to be hotter and warmer, which areas are going to be okay, and so on. So it was really revealing for these people when they actually go for that workshop around 2 hours. They really came out with a very good understanding of their own home and what impacts they have in terms of energy, in terms of water and solid materials. So very simple diagrams like this, where I show them how the sun is actually creating impacts in their home. Like I said, very revealing, very simple methods. And then, of course, based on these principles there, they are able to identify what are the issues they have at home in terms of heating or ventilation, lack of air movement, lack of daylight penetration. So then I think with this type of knowledge, be it for existing buildings or new buildings that people want to construct, if they can start integrating these simple measures, we can go a long way. And the next pillar, like I said, the materials. So in Mauritius, we actually are not doing a good job in terms of solid waste management. Our processes are mostly linear, but we need to find ways where people start doing segregation of waste at home level. And then the next issue, of course, would be what I discussed in this workshop is if you start doing waste segregation at home, then what would happen? Because we don't have infrastructure yet in Mauritius and maybe other countries across Africa where we do have this opportunity to collect the waste separately. For example, in Europe, we have it. I mean, in UK, we do separate our waste and then it's collected separately using different color-coded bags. But then I encourage these participants, is it that we have to rely only when government is going to do that, then we have a solutions? Can't we in our community start having things like community gardens or central collection areas where we use, because these materials, if we separate our organic waste from the other waste streams, you would imagine these waste like paper, what you're calling waste here, which actually very valuable materials. You're having things like paper, plastic, or metal cans. They are very useful materials worth millions if you want. And this could be used by local artists. This could be used even by, I'm sure recyclers will be very happy if you have central compartments at community level. People can come and recyclers very happy to just bring their lorries and just take it away. So I encourage them. Can they work with supermarkets, for example? If you have a supermarket in the locality, discuss with them how we can have very small central facilities where people is going to separate the waste and bring it there on a regular basis, and that's it. So yes, government is doing it forward, but I think we just don't need to rely on them. We need to be able to find solutions at community level. And this was one of the themes to encourage them to look for collaborations. So the next one, the next pillar was water. So very simply, if you start telling people, yes, before you constructed your home, the water was going to the ground very easily, but when you put your home in place, now you have something called runoff because your roof and your hard areas are simply impermeable surfaces. You have runoff. So then if you just collect this runoff and you allow it to, if you don't need the water, I'm sure you will use that water for watering your plants or for washing your car or for washing your hard surfaces at home. You do have uses for them at home, but if in the eventuality you don't have any use for that water, at least just collect it in, you have these blue drums in Mauritius, it's sold like 200, 300 rupees, very low cost. If you just collect this rainwater runoff and you don't need it, just allow it to go to the ground very slowly, and you have nullified the impact of your house when it comes to water. But on the other hand, if you make this water go into the road, everybody, let's say in the community, just takes the water runoff from your roof and just send it on the road, in the road drains, then you're not replenishing the holes. You are sending lots of contaminants into rivers, sediments, topsoil, and we know marine life is impacted down the line. And also, we can get to a situation where we have flooding, but no water to drink. So this is where we're tending to, and it's because we are having impacts, and it's quite revealing to these people to think about now the impacts. So these 3 pillars, I think, is a very good start for us to think about the energy implications of our home, the materials, and the water. And if we start creating this awareness using very simple workshops like this, I think the community would buy in, and we can have this community action created, and people will start buying in. And I'm sure it's going to contribute a lot. If all homes become circular along the lines I'm talking here, at neighborhood level, we have a huge impact in terms of the road drains, be it in energy consumption, or in terms of materials, and we can really drive the process forward. So this is very typical of my workshop. So once everyone has developed the solution separately, they come together and start having colored post-its, and then start writing their own ideas. So I categorize it into these 4 colors, and then I'll be sticking both, one for materials, energy, water, and then others, maybe there are other ideas. And then people will start circulating on these colored boards now and seeing the name of the person will be written on this post-it, so they will start finding areas for collaboration. So this was a very nice experience, very nice workshop. Now I want to talk a bit more now on the biophilic side. I did mention that I think that's one of the main if you are focused of climate action. So I've expanded the regenerate natural systems. So I really like this word regenerate natural systems, because many of our impacts currently that we have in terms of our man-made activities are actually the detriment of natural systems. We need to have a different design philosophy now. Whatever we do, we need to think of our impacts on the natural system and how we can still maintain it. Or because we've created damage, we have to find ways to regenerate natural systems. Yeah. So there are lots of research, I'm not going to go in detail, lots of research that shows us if you start integrating green areas into your environment, be it your home, be it community, what are the implications? This one is about education, school children. So students actually study better when you have green areas. This one is a neighborhood level in terms of the relationship between health and green areas. This one is a bit more, if you want, to do with market value of spaces. So if you have a community with plants, you just read the main points there. People tend to go more in these areas, they tend to invest more, and people are more keen even to travel. Yeah, people are more willing to travel to these areas. So lots of commercial points, if you want. So just about investment, people would always tell you, yes, I need to plant more trees and investment. What do I get back? So there are lots of studies that have shown if you are investing in sustainable measures like this, it makes environmental sense, but it also makes economic sense. Yeah, so just concluding remarks here. So I would say if we want to go ahead and actually implement climate action, we have to be more meticulous, means we have to understand our impacts, and we have to be more caring. That's all, yeah. Because actually in the morning when we had a session with different participants, like I mentioned, sustainability for businesses, one of the panelists said actually, if you want to be to involve in sustainability, you will have to be caring. This is what he said. So it's not something artificial, we're not doing greenwashing. The question was actually what competences or what sort of pre-qualification or university education you need to be able to become a sustainability officer. So this is what one panelist said. The major thing would be you need to be caring. If you're caring, then it's going to follow naturally. Yeah. So like I've said at the start, climate change is not beyond understanding of common man. It's very simple stuff. We typically learn at primary school, so nothing there. So we should not complicate it and say, yes, this is for researchers or for climate or maybe modelers and so on. It's not true. Simple action can be taken, and we need to find ways to render this knowledge non-technical and actually to demonstrate it practically. Like I've shown the concept of a circular home. I'd be very keen, maybe I will seek funding in the future to actually construct one of these homes and make it circular. People can visit and look at the system and live it. If it is very sunny outside, but still you're able to be very comfortable inside without air conditioning, they will say, yes, this works. Then they were going to implement it. So I think we need to have this type of demonstration prototypes. And one thing I've realized when I've actually participated in this ACU climate research cohort is we tend to have, in Mauritius, maybe around the world, we are tending to duplicate efforts. Since climate change is such a pressing issue, people are already dying because of it. We need now to have a more concerted action. We should not split our energy. So we should find ways, maybe the British Council can be a facilitator, the government can be a facilitator to bring people together and make sure we're having one concerted action and not just separate actions around. Now, one word of caution, what I've actually observed and also maybe realized out of this experience is we tend to say Mauritius is a very small country. Our carbon emissions is just 0.01%, so it's negligible. This Mauritius is, even if we tomorrow we start we become carbon free completely, we stop emitting any carbon emissions, the change we would have is actually negligible. It will not impact climate change at all. So the question is, should we actually go with this as usual? Should we just continue, because Mauritius is such a small country and we don't really do represent lots of a big share of the carbon emissions? So this is something which I will answer that later, but I want you to think about it and tell me your view. So should Mauritius be only adapting to climate change and not trying to mitigate, means trying to get, but try to take concrete action? So in the workshops, how do I actually explain to participants what is adaptation, what is mitigation? I'm sure all of you would do football. So if you are mitigating, it's like you're attacking, you're trying to score goals. If you're adapting, means you're in a defensive mode, you're defending. So you can think of it in that way. So this is where I would stop. So I would want to know your views now. So small states like Mauritius, like small states, not just Mauritius, but other small states, should we just be continuing business as usual because we won't make any big impact as such? So should we just be adapting to climate change, or should we actually be very active and try to make changes around? Yeah. So I will give my view afterwards, but now I'll open the floor for any views from the participants. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mahendra. It's been a very, very insightful session. I've been actually jotting notes as we've been going along, and just hearing about the circular homes, which is so important for our island as well, considering how resourceful, and we have so much local resources here, not just in Mauritius, but in Africa generally. Yeah. And yeah, so it's great to see that, seeing such ideas and concepts are floating through in Mauritius, as well as the electric vehicles. This has been so, I remember hearing about these discussions quite some time ago, and hopefully now it's something that's being implemented, with COP26. Yeah. So that's great to see that that's being, more, resonating more in the highlights. And interesting as well, because you mentioned smart agriculture, and we showed an animation by Mahatma Gandhi Institute student. It was called Tree, and it was basically about the importance of planting more trees. Yeah. And one of the key elements in that animation was the fact that I think Mauritius has 17 acres or hectares, sorry, of trees. For a population of 1.2 million approximately. So there is this drive of, and the importance of planting trees. But one of the main key elements, and I believe we've got a question as well that's in our chat room that I'd like you to answer. But one of the main things that you've drawn upon is primary schools, the educative elements into promoting all this, promoting climate change and letting the younger generation be more knowledgeable. So I believe if you go into chat, we do have in
the Q&A.
A Q&A, sorry. I believe it's in Q&A. Can you see it's in answered?
Okay. Yes, answered, yeah. Yeah, it's from Hafiza, is it?
Yes,
Yes. So I think this is very important because we know climate change is influencing all of us, and it will influence future generations. So I think we need to integrate that in the curriculum to make sure our young learners know about it, and as they're growing up, at least they can start taking action, and maybe in the future they would come up with entrepreneurial ideas, or when they are in the work one day they're going to influence decisions. So I think it's very important. We talked actually about the circular economy before, so I've worked with Hafiza to try to contact the Ministry of Education and see how we can integrate circular economy from the perspective of materials into the curriculum. But I think now I'm involving climate change. Of course, they are both interrelated, but of greater concern now is the climate change. So I think, yes, our younger learners, and I'm sure if we already have these materials, like I was saying, we have modules in science now, we have modules at primary school, we have subjects in related to science, to our environment. But if we can make that link now between these subjects and what climate change is and what issues we are fighting, that would be a good follow-up, so that we practically show to these to our kids what is actually climate change and what is change. I definitely think this should be integrated into our curriculum. Yeah.
Yeah, Hafiza, I just saw you put it in the chat. But one of the things the British Council has done is they've developed a wealth of materials for schools, which I think definitely should be shared. I have shared some, and I've shared also with Rodriguez, but I haven't had any feedback, but I think it's definitely something to take forward. And as you say, it's taking those, you know, we have to action things. We can't sit around and wait, and I think we have to be proactive in what we do in Mauritius. You know, interesting, just to comment again on what you were saying about the about the housing. My son has just gone off to Bristol to study architecture, and the whole thing, even before he left, while he was doing his final exams and stuff in Mauritius, he was talking about you know, the importance of, you know, cars and the savings. But one of the things, and I was trying to check with him actually while I was on the call, he had mentioned about the electric cars. Everybody is talking about the electric cars, but there is one problem with the electric cars, is the battery.
Yes, exactly.
To make the batteries is so we do need to find that sort of middle ground, because seeming, isn't it, to produce the batteries
you need some acid, and also the batteries typically last for 7 years. So when it's done, what do we do with them now? It has lots of contaminants, acids in there. It's like creating, we are avoiding carbon emissions by not using fuel like gasoline, diesel, but you have another thing to look at. So I hope now we have learned our lessons, and we think in a holistic and life cycle way. We don't just use batteries and then down the line we don't know what to do with it. It has to be that circular. We need to think about it down the line, I think.
Exactly. No, very interesting.
There's one promising area which is coming up, lots of research in the use of hydrogen for fuel in cars, because hydrogen, when you burn it, it becomes water.
That's exactly what he was talking about. I couldn't remember it. That's it.
So this one is maybe a bit more cleaner, but we still need to know how to deal with hydrogen, because it's highly explosive. If you don't know how to deal with it, it can explode the car. So lots of research have to be done in that as well.
That's so funny, because I'm also currently working with students at the Fashion Design Institute. So we're looking at sustainable design, and it's all very well that the final product can be sustainable, but it's the logistics and the processes to create that product that also we need to bear in mind that has to be sustainable. And I feel like it really is. It is a really tricky balance at times, to get this completely, zero waste or 100% sustainable. So it's just one of those. But I guess this is, starting, as we're talking about, with the education element, starting at a very young age and start instilling such knowledge to kids that they are going to be embedded with this, with a criteria that deals with, the environment and being very eco-conscious and conscious consumers, etc. So, but I am being aware of the time, and sadly, we really do have to end our session. But once again, thank you very much to British Council, Dr. Mahendra, for all your valued input, the key highlights. It's been an amazing discussion. And thank you to everyone at home who's tuned in this Saturday afternoon.
Thank you, Priya.
Take care. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Take care.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.